Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 93. Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 4, Mugato, Gumato.
Working the bar, I hear a lot of inside information. Your friend is a specially trained secret agent for Starfleet Black Ops.
Yeah, right. Okay, man.
Shut up, Hodis.
I'm telling you, they made her into a killing machine. The perfect weapon.
We spend all of our time with Mariner. Pretty sure we'd know if she was the perfect weapon. Most of the time she's napping.
Of course she does. Captain's daughter, friends with the softest guys on the ship. It's a perfect cover. Haven't you ever noticed that she seems to know every fighting style?
She is a master of Ambujitsu.
Look, we may be soft, but we're not gullible.
But just watch out. When her back's against the wall, that's when the training kicks in. She's programmed to protect herself at all costs. All costs.
Okay, buddy, you heard wrong.
I bet they didn't believe the rumors on the Atlantis either, until it was too late and they were all...
Hodis, could you get back to work? Billups is still waiting on his peach daiquiri.
Keep your pips on, Billups.
Episode 92.
Episode 92.
Wait, I thought it was like 94 last week.
No, it's 93. This is episode 93.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was last week, wasn't it?
No,
I screwed it all up again.
It's all
That's
good.
not the first time I've done that.
It's all good.
Shit.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Let's get it together.
Okay.
I know. I've
So-
blown it from the beginning.
Episode 93.
This one's called Mugato.
No, what?
That's some song I don't know
Gumato
Mugato.
Lovato.
Okay.
Demi Lovato. Is that her name? Demi Lovato?
First, this is the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
You know it is.
It is episode 93 of the podcast, and we are watching. We watched
Season
and we are
2,
now
episode
discussing.
4.
Yes,
Lower
season
Decks.
season 2, episode 4. Mugatu.
Roboto. There's a variation in the pronunciation.
Mugatu Gumato.
Mugato.
Mugatu Gumato.
Mugato
Muguto.
Wow, we're already getting into the on-running joke that was going on through this episode.
That was my point.
That joke was very funny. We'll get to the rest of the episode, but why not start with just the basic running gag of the multiple pronunciations?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Mugato. So for historical background, many folks in the audience will be familiar with this, but the Mugato originally appeared in the TOS episode, A Private Little War. And in the script, I think, and pardon me if I've gotten this backwards because this episode has only made it more confusing. In the script, as I recall, the creature was called a Gumato. But DeForest Kelley could not, for the life of him, pronounce it properly. He just couldn't do it. He kept
was
getting
from
it.
Georgia.
He kept getting it wrong. So he just couldn't put the letters together, the syllables together properly. So he and William Shatner just started calling it a Mugatu.
Because in the credits, it's Gumato, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was Gumato, and they agreed to change it to Mugato to accommodate DeForest Kelley, but even still, both he and Shatner kept referring to it as a Mugatu. But the stunt guy who was in the suit at the end of the episode is credited as playing a Gumato.
Oh, man.
Right? So they really play up that meta joke in this episode with the different pronunciations. But specifically, if you notice, every time Shax says it, he says it completely differently.
Yeah.
Just in the space of like from the shuttle to like the shore, like he said it like 3 different ways.
He said when we were talking about shooting their genitals, he says these Mugutus are endangered.
Mugutu. He says Gumato. He says
And then,
Mugato.
then he says this is where we detected Gumato life signs.
Yeah.
And then and that's after they transport, and then they see the poo poo, and he goes Mugato dung with the poo poo.
And Patingi says it a couple different times, a couple different ways as well.
Patingi.
Oh yeah, Patingi
He says like Mugos.
He says, yeah,
He says
calls them-
Mugatos.
He goes Mugatos,
Mugatos.
and that's after he says Mugatos, and then he says Mugos.
Yeah, Mugos.
Yeah, so there's a lot of jokes going on, and then Tana at the end actually says one too.
Referring to the poison, as I recall, yeah?
Yeah, she goes Mugutu venom can have Latin effects. This was really confusing
Latent
me.
effects. she said.
Sorry.
Latin effects.
Okay, come on, you're gonna correct it?
No. I'm sorry.
You're gonna correct my pronunciation?
It's just, it's in the context of the conversation, it was amusing.
Oh, okay.
I read an article where
I
like
get
the-
wait. I get the joke now.
I wasn't sure if you were going for a gag. Or
No, yeah, no, but I deserve that. I was just so funny I didn't even realize it. Someone might say I'm just dumb, but yeah, Mugato, Mugutu, all sorts of different ones, and they said Gumato I think once. Did they say Gumato once?
It might
I
have
think
been
they said it a couple times.
A couple times they might have said it in what would be, by all accounts, the close to appropriate way. I guess Gumato is the correct thing, but Mugato is next best.
Yeah, they said your long-term revenue streams will come to include ticket prices, merchandise, concessions, the whole Gumato. So that was the second one.
Oh, is that what he said? I thought
Yeah.
he said like whole cabana.
No,
Yeah.
he said the whole
And then
Because that was really
Gumato.
funny when he said that.
And then of course it was after this is where we detected a Gumato life sign. It was Shaxx. They didn't say one of them though. There was one of them that
What's a pronunciation that was left out?
It was-
We'll write Mike McMahon straight away.
Mugato.
Meow Gatu.
Meow gato. The cat could have said that.
it was it was one of them. So wait, I kept like trying to go back, rewind this, and look at it and remember and get it all spelled right. But I kept, even as I was writing it
It's
down,
confusing.
I was mixing it up in my head as I was writing it. So this shit really.
We're teasing DeForest Kelly, but I have sympathy for him. It is a peculiar combination of syllables.
Mogatu. They never say Mogatu.
Mogatu.
They never say Mogatu. They say Mugato, Mugutu, Gumato. Then the Patinki says stuff, but they never say Mogatu.
I mean, unless you made up the made up word, it's sometimes you might not know how to say the made up word.
I'm just saying, it's the only one that Boimler introduced as a possible pronunciation that they didn't actually say in the episode. So yeah, that was a fun joke, because I didn't even really notice that too much the first time around. And it's not. And looking back, I should have noticed it the first time around, but it wasn't until the second time that I noticed that joke.
When I watched the show right when it aired, I noticed that there were multiple pronunciations, but it wasn't until subsequent viewings that I saw that there was some structure to how they were changing up the pronunciations, particularly around the Shaxx joke, which when you notice it, it's way funnier because, like you said, he's saying them in such rapid succession.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's truly like
in the other cases, it's different characters pronouncing it differently.
Yeah, it was. He was about to transport, says Mugutu. After transport says Gumato, and then we're looking at the poo-poo is Mugato. Eating poop, of course, is really super gross and all, but it's the way that Shaxx sniffs. He does a super sniff. You know how I've mentioned before?
You're saying it's
he stuck his finger in it.
It's grosser.
He stuck in his thumb and pulled out a plum, and he was smelling it.
What?
He had a whole big goop of poop on his finger.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, no, but he didn't pull it out of his nose. I was saying like way he sniffed.
But yeah, he put it up to his nose.
I know what you're saying.
It made that noise that.
Yeah.
And then it's even worse. It always.
So that was grosser than eating it.
Yes, because it's like everyone always sounds like they got a nose full of powder, like, whenever they're sniffing on TV shows or movies, and that sound is gross, and it makes me think of stuffed up sinuses and noses, and it bums me out.
You think Bajorans are into poop?
Like, eating poop is gross, but we've approached that subject enough. We have not talked enough about gross TV sniffs.
Is it coprophagia?
Yeah, coprophagia.
Coprophagia is eating poop. Coprophilia is just a generic love of feces.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I had the distinction between coprophagia and coprophilia.
You got it perfect on the dot. So anyway, so that sniff is just like, it gives me, it's like how certain sounds fuck you up, like when people rub balloons together.
Or the vomiting sound.
Oh yeah, that's supposed to be one of the grossest
A
sounds.
la the story Chunk says in Goonies. The classic tale Chunk says in Goonies where he pranks a theater with fake vomit, but then people start actually vomiting, and then the sound of them actually vomiting makes him vomit.
That was exposition, though, right? Like he didn't. That didn't actually happen.
It did happen. It's not exposition, and it is in the sense that he's telling a tale, but I would say it doesn't quite qualify because it's not advancing the plot. It's purely character driven.
It builds a character. Yeah. So I guess if you want to make that distinction, then I guess it's not.
And it grosses out the Fratellis.
So there was the opening scene with the gym, and that was cool.
Ambujitsu.
So okay.
They were getting like their teeth knocked out.
Yeah. So
at least a tooth.
I was looking up different definitions here of something that is relevant to what we were talking about.
I was going to say just random words.
Words of things. So there's
Blorgnor.
So there's jitsu of jujitsu fame, right?
Jujitsu and ninjutsu.
That jitsu is JITSU. It's a brief synopsis is a family of Japanese martial arts and a system of close combat that can be used in a defensive or else. It's just a general combat system.
Sort of like a D&D system.
Yeah, where you roll dice, and depending on
it's like a 20-sided dice.
Which version you're playing. Different rules.
Yeah, right. It depends on what kind of book you got. Now, so that's jitsu. Now I looked up jutsu, Jutsu.
Jutsu?
There's jitsu and there's jutsu. Jutsu.
Is there a jigsaw?
That's a different movie. Jutsu is Narutopedia.
Oh, Narutopedia.
Naruto. Oh,
I thought it was a Wikipedia, but for a narrower set of topics.
That's a good idea. I thought it was called Naruto.
We're not going to have all the topics, just the ones we're interested in.
Well, Jutsu.
I don't know how it's pronounced, by the way. Don't take my pronunciation.
Isn't that like a cartoon?
Nobody's complained about the way I pronunciation yet.
Are you saying pronounce?
I say pronunciation.
So in the mystical,
but I'm pretentious.
It's in Narutopedia. It says it's mystical arts a ninja will utilize in battle. That's jutsu. But then of course you have jutsu, like the Wikipedia definition, which is talking about a technique, method, spell, skill, or trick, is a bound morpheme of the Sino-Japanese lexical stratum of the Japanese language.
Yeah, a bound morpheme. Yeah,
meaning, technique, method, skill. I don't know. It's kind of so that's jutsu. Jutsu.
For real.
I'm sure there's all sorts of details I might be missing, but this is just random sort of.
Did you look up the ambo bit?
So I looked up Jiatsu, Jyutsu, because it turns out it's not Anbo-jitsu, it's not Ambo-jutsu, it's Ambo-jiatsu.
Okay.
Jyutsu. And the only thing I could find is it's related to this thing called Jinshin Jutsu, which is a gentle form of acupressure therapy that uses light finger pressure over specific points on the body while fully clothed. So
I don't like that.
It doesn't use like those sticks with the.
No, so I guess the closest thing is it would probably be jitsu. I guess it would just be jitsu. Well, say one of these. I don't know how accurate this definition is. It says, "What's the meaning of jitsu?" You know, on Google, you search, and it gives you a series of questions and a little drop-down thing. It says, "An art of weaponless fighting employing holds, throws, and paralyzing blows to subdue or disable an opponent."
Holds, throws,
but Ambo-jitsu has weapons.
It's got weapons,
right.
man.
So, but here's the thing and this is where my knowledge is very limited, because I always thought of jujitsu as like ancient Japanese martial art associated with samurai warriors. So I guess maybe it's the martial art you use when your sword gets knocked out of your hand or something, or I don't know.
Close combat hand fighting,
or disabling. So
but what about ambo? What's the ambo mean?
So, but I was just saying is that I don't know.
Comes from Rambo.
I don't think there's weapons associated with jitsu, but I know it's incorporating.
What we're doing is we're reverse engineering how much the TNG writers thought about this.
Yeah,
because if we look at the definitions and they make sense in some way, then we can think they thought about it. Otherwise, they were just like, I don't know, instead of jujitsu, why not just ambo jitsu?
Yeah, I probably talked more about it than they thought about it. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if jitsu incorporates weaponless fighting into its weapon fighting, and the weapon fighting is called something else, or I don't know if it's incorporated, but it seems to be weaponless. Okay, so then we have this one, which is...
Does ambo, is that defined in Latin as nuh-uh?
Anbo?
Ambo. Like ambo-jitsu?
Nuh-uh.
What?
Isn't this ambo-jitsu?
Yeah, it's nuh-uh jitsu.
Yeah, because jitsu is weaponless fighting, and ambo is like negating that because they have weapons, because they have these unbalanced club
that was
things.
really deep and twisted. I don't like. I'm trying.
One could argue it was very clever.
It's. I'm still trying to figure it out a little bit.
No, we've reversed roles tonight.
No! Scream at me. I like it.
I am still me.
Memory Alpha says Ambojutsu, or simply Ambo, was a type of human martial arts practiced in the 24th century. And then it goes to say it took place in a circular arena. Two opponents would compete against each other.
With some kind of Q-tips.
Real quick note: they already thought they were gonna kick Mariner's ass, and not only did they fight him, they fought him at the same time.
Yes.
Boimler's like, I'm gonna kick her ass, and like her and fucking Rutherford are both going 2-on-1 on this one. So that's
like
kind of
Boimler like threw up. Rutherford got like the stick got broken and went through his palm.
Yeah,
I went through his palm.
She
That
speared
was
his palm
weird.
to spear him and trap him on the floor.
Mariner lost a tooth. Boimler lost a tooth. It was a mess. And like that Shax guy was just like, I'm 10 minutes early. I'm just gonna hang.
He's like reading a book.
So it says the staff is a proximity sensor on one end and a small spherical cushion on the other. A player could detect by means of audio signal where his adversary was. Oh, okay, that answers a question. So I was like, they have those like in
They're blind,
the
yes.
blast shields with the blindness. I was like, what's the point of that? It's because they detect movement through their sticks. Because the sticks have a proximity sensor, and that's how they're able to do it. I was like, what's the point of being blind?
On TNG...
Is it like some kind of like Star Wars Force thing? No, it's actually based on some real shit.
And TNG, when they introduced this with Riker and his dad, they made a...
Riker?
Yeah, they played Kyle. Jeremy Lucas. They played that up a little bit. The whole that you are prevented from being able to see during the course of this activity.
Well, apparently the move called Hachiden Kiritsu was illegal in the 24th century and would give a competitor using it an unfair advantage.
Yes. Didn't Riker... Either Riker's dad did that to him or Riker did that to his dad.
When Will turned 12 years old, Kyle knew he could not defeat him by conventional means, so he began defeating his son with this move. And until, as an adult, Riker discovered that his father had, quote unquote, cheated him.
Yeah, I haven't seen that episode, actually. I should watch that.
Kyle defended this attitude by explaining he had to keep the boy interested in Ambojutsu by not letting him win.
It's the Icarus factor, I
But he
believe.
cheated. Yeah, it was the Icarus factor. By not letting him win, that doesn't even make sense because you're cheating. It doesn't say you should cheat. It's not letting someone win because you're not cheating. Oh, I'm not going to cheat. I must be letting you win.
It's
let me into your soul, Jesse.
An ancient philosophical debate that came to prominence during the 1980s when all the hippies got jobs and we're like, fuck the rest of you. I got mine.
Mariner was really stretching when that opens. She was doing some kind of stretching, like meditation or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah, she's pretty in shape.
Remember that part?
That was awesome. Sorry, that was from the Chris Farley's SNL.
Saturday Night Live.
I wasn't being weird.
Saturday Night Live. All right.
But yeah.
So we've gotten into it, but I guess might as well break this down into the two component pieces. This is pretty much an A plot and a B plot and a little bit of a C plot. With the C plot, I'd say is that character Hyde and Captain Freeman,
The green guy.
There's no
played by Paul F. Tompkins again in a new role. Keep it up, Mike McMahon. We like Paul F. Tompkins. Give him as many roles in Star Trek as possible. Ideally, I'd like to see a spin-off that was just like Star Trek Paul F. Tompkins and he plays all the characters.
Yeah, there wasn't any kind of there wasn't much deeper meaning to this episode. It was just kind of gave a chance for Boimler to like look like a cool guy, basically. And Boimler and Rutherford looked like a cool guy, which is interesting because the one where they went on the collector ship, that was the same idea, except it was Rutherford and Tendi. Who got to take over. And both times was the first one, Mariner, the first one she gave up responsibility just because she thought they'd do better. In this one, they were paranoid, which is why they ended up doing it.
We see a lot of Mariner being the coolest kid, for most of season 1, and so now we're seeing more episodes where she's not the one that saves the day all the time.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. It shows her being like the cool, like not like always the coolest kid.
Yeah.
I mean, even when she's not cool, she's so cool. But
She's not
Yeah.
leading the plot.
Yeah.
She's sort of the fulcrum of
Yeah.
the plot.
right. But it wasn't sure. Like it wasn't there weren't many really steps forward in the overarching plot of the show.
There was a moral, I thought, a good classic Star Trek moral. As in most of these Lower Decks episodes, a lot of good Star Trek-y bits and tropes. But the moral that I took from the A plot, which I guess we'll point like the A plot is Boimler and Rutherford's whole deal with Mariner. The B plot is Tendi and getting the medical scans.
Oh yeah, another mission she got sent on by Tana.
Yeah, so we'll discuss that in a moment. But in the A plot, it seemed to me that the main message was it was a warning against rumor mongering and being convinced by a rumor, and then immediately how the confirmation bias kicks in, where Honus, the New England bartender, Stephen King style bartender,
Yeah, it
Was
was
it
like-
Honus or was it Otis?
I think it was Honus.
It was Honus.
Sometimes
I've
dead
seen,
is better.
I've seen two different interpretations.
There's that South Park character that does that voice
Yeah.
too. He says, "No, don't go down that rod."
It's like a New England.
It's a
kind
New
of
England
accent.
Yeah.
Stephen King
Yeah.
thing.
like Maine or something.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what-
Maine, specifically Maine.
Like, what was that movie?
Yeah, even-
what was
even
that
northern.
movie where Kathy
Pet
Bates?
Sematary?
Kathy
Oh
Bates.
no, you're talking-
It was
Misery.
no. It was
Dreamcatcher.
Dolores Claiborne.
Yes, Dolores Claiborne.
Yes, I know what the one you're talking about.
Yeah, wasn't
that's a
that-
great movie. It's
Yeah.
a Stephen King story.
Yeah, isn't that like a New
Totally.
England thing?
Probably.
In Maine, it's all the
Yeah,
Stephen King
yeah.
stuff takes
Yeah.
up. But Honus basically is a Mainer, we can presume.
Mainer.
So he passes along this rumor to them, which they even laugh off to begin with. But then him just leaning in and looking a little sinister and talking in that voice, they immediately start considering it as an option, and then they end up looking for evidence, but they only see the evidence that supports their now pre-existing conclusion, right?
I like it when he says, "Keep your pips on, Billet."
Yes, I did too. I really like this Honus character, and I hope they bring him back because it charmed me.
And then there was his boss in the background. It's like, if you don't want to bartend, just don't bartend. Come on, man, I'm sick of this shit. Like it was so weird.
Well, that's like a meta joke
Billups is waiting for a daiquiri.
on the future economy in Starfleet, where you don't have to do any job. You're not required. They don't
want
need you
to.
Yeah, right. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
You don't have to do this.
We could just use the replicate.
This show is really brilliant at getting in that meta humor, but it's in some cases so deeply layered that we won't catch it the first, second, maybe even third or fourth time, which makes it really great for the fandom, in my opinion, because it lets you discuss things at a level that can be sometimes difficult. If you're discussing Star Trek Discovery or Picard, those are ongoing serialized stories. I find them enjoyable, but it can be a little troublesome when you're trying to have a nerdy Star Trek style discussion about them, because you don't know the conclusion to the story. You don't know the next step. You might be guessing. You might be making references to previous examples in Star Trek. But with Lower Decks, you have that extra layer of like, what points are they making either about the Star Trek fandom or about fiction, about the Starfleet universe, some of the things we hadn't considered before, or they look at it from a slightly different angle, or they take an ongoing fan theory and sort of make it real or critique or comment on it. And that can just be layered in dialogue, jokes, background images, things like that.
Yeah, the show has that commentary on Star Trek in general, which you'd get out of like a critic's review or a podcast, for example. It's like what they turned in. Hey,
a podcast.
For example, if you ever heard of one of those, but like it's like the same idea though. It's like where they're throwing their editorialized sort of version of Star Trek. That's pretty true. I feel it's been pretty true, in the spirit of Star Trek.
They're playing some kind of board game that's like Civilization, but it's like diplomats.
It's called Diplomath.
Diplomath, and they use like what they learned from that to like
Save
save
the day.
them from the friggin' Ferengi.
Which is great because it's a Star Trek conclusion.
Yeah,
right?
that's like the official game of Starfleet or something.
And I love that they have the joke that compromising is, when nobody's happy, and
then it can end.
they both look so sad, and they're like, okay, I guess that's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. And then they high five each other. They compromise.
So when Rutherford's like, when they're all excited, he's like, we're both about to lose, and Mariner's like, why is that good? And Boimler goes, if both sides are equally unsatisfied with the negotiation, you can close the deal. Ready for final offers? And the way he said that, it sounded as if he were quoting from like a manual or something. When it was really just
even less than the manual. It sounded like he was quoting the back of the box that holds the game.
Yeah, right. But it was really just like this sort of like editorial on the idea of compromise. So they were all pumped about being disappointed.
But the added joke to that was not only is the joke funny on its own at the beginning because it's talking about not just Star Trek, it's talking about the concept of diplomacy and sort of some funny aspects of it. Then it's funny again because they return to that joke at the end in a brilliant way to resolve that story by instead of resorting to action or violence, they create something that looks like Kirk's cannon that he fashioned to fight the Gorn. But
it was a projector.
It's a projector with it's a PowerPoint.
It was a diamond bazooka. We thought it was a diamond bazooka or whatever.
But it was a futuristic PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, right.
It was a business perspective.
Because the Ferengi all flinched. They were like, oh no.
Oh. But that's funny, right? But then they add in yet another joke on it, which is they close the episode, they bookend the episode with the game again, which is cool. But the gag is that Mariner is actually doing extremely well.
Yeah.
And we don't know. I watched this part repeatedly because I was trying to interpret Mariner's look, because she gives these little looks with her eyes.
Oh, you think she was fucking with them?
It's. I think they've, and I believe this was on purpose, that they make it so ambiguous that you can't tell if her expression is, I'm just enjoying playing this game with my friends and learning this game or whatever, and that she has some sort of natural talent towards it, or if she totally understands the game, and because she understands the game and the point of the game, she's going to like Kobayashi Maru it like Kirk. Instead of coming to a compromise that everyone's like not happy, she's going to psychologically trick them into thinking she's like being a what do you call it, a ringer or whatever. Like if you're like doing a pool game and tricking
a hustler,
a hustler, yeah. If you're
the hustlers, what's it called? It was called diplomacy.
It was diplomath.
Diplomath.
I think it was called diplomath.
Diplomacy.
Diplomacy.
I'd have to watch that again, but it would be funny because she is sort of like, it's like even though other people are like exercising their strengths, she's still somehow in it somehow.
In it to win it.
They're drinking like beers when they
drink beers a lot.
It's like when they're off duty, they're playing this game.
That was kind of fun.
It's just really, it totally looked like fun because it had like neat little pieces and funny little cards and stuff, and it's
kind of fun to sit in like a restaurant style place or a public place and play a board game
so
like that.
TNG guys are just playing poker and like fuck that.
I like it
Poker's lame,
because we like all sorts of things along those lines, like Magic the Gathering and
yes, we
things
do
like that. And
Warhammer.
The idea of being able to do that in an open public place for a lot of people, I hope it's different these days, but for a lot of people, it would be uncomfortable to go to a restaurant or hang out in a cafeteria or something and just openly play your nerdy game. That could attract negative attention.
Like those kids that would play Vampire at the diner.
Yeah,
that was a little different. That was LARPing.
Different. It's a lot different.
But I respected that, and you have like the balls to do that and not worry.
You got big old nerd balls.
I always think that's awesome, and when you see other people do it, it gives you strength to be like, I can be like openly nerdy and fuck it.
I'm going to build a catapult and shoot Nerf.
And they did it in this dive restaurant that the clientele was like these vampire LARPers, and the other side was a much different sort of crowd.
I really like that they have the ability to just hang out comfortably playing their game, and there's a great shot at the very end of the episode where it's sort of zooming out the window, looking into the bar area, and you're seeing them laughing and having fun. But I was taking some screenshots, and one of those screenshots was of that shot where you see it from outside, the hull of the ship, the window. You see them sitting up next to the window. But when you look back, like the whole place is just filled with people smiling and interacting, and there's so much life going on in the background, just as you would see in a TNG or Deep Space Nine or something, the animated format lets them go even beyond that because they can do whatever they want. They don't have to pay extras to stand around in the background leaning on
That's
things.
a good point about the extras I didn't think about. Is they don't have to pay for extras in animated stuff.
TOS has a ton of extras.
Yes,
There's a bunch of people walking around like in the corridor.
That was back in the days when you just had groups of people.
There's a lot of. Yeah.
I'll take 2 of those and 1 of those and 3 of those. Put them all in red shirts and get them to corridor 3 as soon as you can.
Yeah.
And then they all look like they were recently dressed up to be Italian mobsters or Irish cops or whatever. Now they just pull like a red shirt over their body.
TNG, like it's like seems like nobody's there or something, or everybody's in their own.
After
like,
the
room or
pilot,
something.
after Encounter
the pilot
Farpoint
had a
has
bunch.
tons of people walking around, and then most of the rest of the time it's relatively sparse corridor.
Apparently, they have over 100 types of species.
Everybody's working.
They have over 100 types of species in the Cerritos.
Yes,
over 100 types,
according to Dr. Tana.
Yeah, so it makes me wonder how many types they had on the Enterprise. I guess something similar, but I didn't realize it was that many.
Yeah,
because you only see a good maybe 10 max.
And they have the cetaceans in cetacean ops.
They keep forgetting. I mean, I don't keep forgetting about that, but it's like I remember it, but every time I hear it, I'm always like, oh yeah, that's crazy. Because my mind still hasn't I haven't wrapped my mind around it even though I know it's been known for a while.
I'm guessing we'll see cetaceans in lower decks.
They love to go swimming.
Sooner rather than later.
They made the most reference to.
They canonized it basically, as far as I understand. Maybe some other shows did previously, but definitely.
Where did it first come from?
The technical manual for TNG.
So it was
the Enterprise D.
Okay, so it was a technical manual. That's where it's.
Yeah, in the Enterprise D.
Are those supposed to be canon?
Well, they're semi-canon in that
it's Paramount.
They weren't mentioned on screen, but Rick Sternbach and others who helped design the production design of TNG. They put them together. So, like the concept, I think the concept of astrometrics, for example, originated there, but which we do see eventually, but the cetacean ops was listed. I think they also, and it might have gone back and forth, but I know at least for a while there was like a mall listed.
There was a mall on the Enterprise.
And it made me laugh because it made me think of Spaceballs, where in Spaceballs, like when they have to like abandon Spaceball 1 where they're like, close all the shops on the mall. And it made me think of, there's a connection there. It's the 1980s. Everyone thought that malls were like just the thing.
There's another book that talks about planets and aliens. It's called Worlds of the Federation, and it talks about the Medusans that are also used for navigational purposes, much the same as cetacean species.
So I'm surprised. Yeah, the TNG, maybe it was just it was just unnecessary for the purpose of the show. But yeah, you'd think that a ship would have a big open space, like a giant sort of to simulate some kind of, because they have that in all sorts of things. They have it in Mass Effect. They have it in the Expanse. They have this sort of like the simulation of outside. Do they have a sky roof thingy in Expanse that makes it look like the sky?
In a couple of the ships, yeah, like in the Medina ship, for example, the big originally a Mormon ship.
And so if you're talking about them having a mall, it makes me think, there should have been a big open super space, but I guess like
that would cost money.
That would cost a lot of money.
And they had the holodeck.
They had the holodeck.
Yeah, but the promenade is a mall.
How many holodecks they got? You'd think like that shit would be used
up. At least 3, I think.
Yeah, 3 for over. Yeah, exactly, for 1,000 people.
3.
Oh, yeah. There's over 1,000 people in there
book
using
that time ahead of time.
Yeah. So, but Jesse, you were talking about the books. Speaking of the books, you were talking about like the novels.
Not a novel, but just another book that was like the technical manual. So just listed planets and more aliens and stuff.
So I want to preface this with, I know it's just a story. It's all made up. It is what it is, and what we make of it.
Let me make a note of this. It's just a story.
It's totally just a story.
I'm quoted on
what we make of it.
Canon. That is what the story actually is.
Exactly.
And then there's canon that contradicts the previous canon.
So right. So are the Star Trek novels supposed to be canon?
No,
I don't think it's. I think
most people would not suggest that. There's always going to be a debate because the term canon is itself a debatable point.
Right. That's why I say it's a weird subject to talk about because it doesn't really matter. But
there's a whole fuckload of Star Trek novels,
right?
Like all different, from all the different shows.
Oh, I had one called like this Devil's Heart, or I don't know. It was on the cover. There was a heart, and there was Picard standing there. I don't know, it was some kind of heart.
I'd like to read some good ones. I haven't read that many, and I've only read 2, and one was good and one was not.
Why don't you all write us in either at feedback at itsgotstartrek.com or on Twitter at itsgotstartrek.
Yeah, it's called The Devil's Heart. The Devil's Heart.
and the devil is hard.
Yeah.
Write us in with suggestions for Star Trek novels that you think we might enjoy.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Probe is good.
I used to read I read Probe and First Destiny or Best Destiny. There's a bunch of good ones out there, but it's been a while since I've gotten into those Star Trek books.
Now, compare that with Star Wars. Was Star Wars originally supposed to be canon? I thought it was because they made it.
That was originally supposed
because
to be
they
canon,
went through the effort to say nope, it's no longer canon after
Right.
Disney bought it, which is kind of fucked up. That you can just wave a wand and it all goes away. And I know it doesn't matter, but it's still kind of like really
corporations.
Really, you're just gonna fucking toss this shit aside.
I think there are more Star Trek novels than there are Star Wars.
So, and you think Star Trek was never meant to be canon, but the Star Wars were at first.
The complexity in the debate is that even the term canon is complicated by the fact that it is borrowed from the literary canon, and the literary canon is problematic in that it's unlike a corporate-owned TV show where you can at least define some sort of constraints as to, okay, if this entity produces it, it's official, and if this entity does not, it is not. The literary canon is just what people believe it to be, collected over time, essentially on the syllabi of you gather together the syllabuses of
syllabi.
Yeah, the point being that it's what people teach as the canon is what becomes the canon, and then that is problematic because most of those people were old white dudes, and so they're picking stuff that they're interested in.
So the first part you're talking about, that's just like with language, though. Language is what is taught to be properly communicative, and that's why it's dynamic.
But this is a different level down than that because there's the malleability of language, but there's still some sort of in theory some levels of consistency, some zones of consistency. The canon is nestled in there that creates some of those problems because it is what you are told it is by people who are identified as authorities, and it's much more flexible and malleable than what we would call the Star Trek canon. Because the Star Trek canon has the singular entity that owns the copyright, and so you can argue. The easiest argument is to say if Paramount produces it, it's canon. If not, then it's.
And if they say it's no longer canon, see, that's the thing is it's the rules don't apply. Like you can do anything with canon, as is proved by the fact that the fucking Disney said nope, all these books in Star Wars are no good anymore. Because they can just do that and it's not canon anymore. So there basically are no rules in that sense, except that it's the company that owns it.
The rules are made by whoever controls the property, and you can debate that that's good or bad.
Most of those books, I think, were the same publisher, so that was just that.
Lucasfilm ran the show, and they had this whole extended world thing going on. Whereas the Star Trek has always been a little complicated because there was that period of time, where the movies were owned by one entity, and the TV show was owned by CBS, Viacom, and then there was they split and remerged and all that other business. So it's always been a little bit more complicated. But there is some level of consistency in terms of the entity producing Star Trek is if it's on screen, then it counts. Basically, if it's produced by Paramount, you don't have to agree with that, or you can lament that is the case. But I think that is the point. I don't recall why we were talking about canon in the first place regarding
talking about cetacean ops and then something else.
So the A plot has there are some those basic little morals to it, as we touched on earlier, and the actual story I liked because even though it's a fairly straightforward Star Trek story, Star Trek away mission story, in the loosest sense of the term, the actual what was going to happen kept me guessing. I wasn't sure. I didn't know they were going to come across. What was that guy's name? Patingi?
Oh, yeah, Patingi. Yeah, so that scene was funny. So that
Australian Tellarite.
Now, whether they meant this or not, this is what I was reminded of. Like when they were hiding under the tree.
It was a direct reference to Lord of the Rings.
Yes. Okay, that one.
Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, and
I checked the angles. The camera angles were exactly like the
where the Mugato was looking for him. It was like the ring wraith. But the next one I don't think they meant was Patingi himself. I was thinking Jurassic Park and clever girl. That's a terrible
clever girl. This is my Australian accent. Clever girl. It's so good.
We do have listeners in Australia.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say I'm ignorant. And I want to be more cogent. No.
less ignorant.
Less ignorant.
You want to be more Gnostic.
Gnostic.
Yeah.
Well, cogent means clear, logical, and convincing. So I looked up the definition.
All right.
Because you can do that.
That sounds like what I want to be.
So anyway, yeah, me too.
Patingi.
So yeah, he reminded me of that hunter dude on Jurassic Park, but I don't know if they really necessarily. I think that was a Tellarite.
But he was a Tellarite. But that little bit was both hilarious. It was such a great setup, but it also was directly connected to the previous theme I was talking about, which is the whole confirmation bias, right? So they get it in their heads that Mariner is some sort of black ops person and working for Starfleet and on some undercover mission. And so when they start trying to determine if that's the case, the only evidence they pay attention to is evidence that either supports the case or can be interpreted to support the case that she is indeed a highly skilled, murderous Starfleet black ops person. The same thing happens with Patingi because they're scared out of their mind. They don't know what to do. And then they come across this Patingi person who just sort of casually explains that they know about Mugatos, and they're like, okay, he says he knows about them.
And then brother was like, Patingi rules.
They're just automatically on board with this guy wandering around in the woods.
Yeah, right.
They haven't checked his credentials or anything like that. And you can understand that. You're sympathetic with that position, but to me, I think it's such a great opportunity to say like, hey, yeah, even in a stressful situation, maybe don't immediately just assume that, oh yeah, somebody's just walking by, just they know their shit.
Did you ever see that movie, that Werner Herzog movie, Grizzly Man, about that guy?
I was thinking about that too, actually.
It's kind of like that because this guy, the Grizzly Man guy, had no business being in the wild. He was just like, I'm going to hang with the wildlife and hang with the bears, and that's what this guy was doing.
Yeah,
and they both totally got eaten by a wild big monster wildlife creature.
Right. Yeah, I was actually thinking that.
That dude was not Australian, but he would totally cop an Australian accent. Apparently, if they talk about that on the movie, like.
Oh, he would just be in Australia.
Yeah, he was just doing a character.
Wow.
Because he was like a acting student or something.
Yeah, what is it? Patingi said something to the effect of like, "Oh, I just assumed I knew about him" or something like that.
He read five books.
Read 5 books.
I think I know enough.
He says like I have 5 books, and they thought like he had written 5 books.
Yeah, because they were like, "Can we be in your next book?"
Oh yeah, and then he says, "Yeah, I figured I knew enough to walk amongst them." So he specifically says walk amongst them.
And
like
he's all going like, he's making some weird call.
Yeah.
Attracting the danger.
So the Black Ops thing. First of all, I thought that knife game that she was playing on her hand, when I was a little kid, I thought I made that game up. And then I started discovering...
You made that up?
No, I discovered it a lot sooner than this episode. But
Mumbly Pig.
Did you watch Alien?
It's called Mumbly Pig.
It's got a name? Are you just making that up?
That's what the pirates called it.
Where do you get this from?
I don't know. From pirate lore.
Okay.
Mumbly Pig?
Mumbly Pig.
Well, I don't remember if it was Alien. I thought I invented it, and I can't remember the first time I saw it, and that's when I realized I didn't invent it. And in my head, I was thinking, I always used to play that game. That's such a stupid game. Why would that be a thing? You know?
I know. Why would anybody play that game?
Yeah. But I guess she was actually doing it, but was she actually flipping a knife up in the air and being badass about it?
She's pretty badass.
She is pretty badass. And then Rutherford, okay, so when he was talking about the likelihood of it, he was like, as if Starfleet would ever hide a Black Ops agent on one of their own ships. You know, and Boimler's basically like Starfleet intelligence does it, and Tuvok did it when he infiltrated the Maquis. Now, isn't that a little different though? Because when Tuvok did it, when he infiltrated the Maquis, was that on a Starfleet ship? Did the Maquis steal Starfleet ships?
I agree that you could argue it's a little bit different. They were seeking for canon examples.
Yeah, because
they had to stretch it a little bit.
Yeah, because even if it was a Maquis ship, it would be under the control of their adversary, yes. And so that wouldn't count. You could send a Black Ops agent there. You wouldn't be sending it to one of your own ship because someone else controls it. You know, so it's not quite the same as this one.
I think there's some Discovery shit with some Section 30, whatever the fuck. With
Section 31.
Yes, that's what it is. and some shadiness on Starfleet vessels.
There's definitely some examples you could put, but I think a lot of the examples would have been too complicated or too obscure. And they're willing to make obscure jokes here, but in this case, they were trying to make a specific point, and the joke on the point that helps them convince them, because at first they're saying like Starfleet wouldn't do this, and then Boimler's listing off some examples that convey actually indeed Starfleet would do this, and that helps convince them or move them in the direction of deciding that, okay, maybe Mariner is in fact a Black Ops
It's
agent.
Section 31, but what is it about rule? What's the rule on the internet?
Rule 34.
Rule 34. All right.
Different.
And then there's the rules of acquisition.
It's because they're both in the 30s, I guess it confuses
It's
me.
still not the same though, because
one is about porn and the other one is
No,
about...
I didn't think it was the same. I just, it was just both like numbers and sections and
all these kids, they say with all their
columns
goddamn
and-
numbers. There's numbers all over the place. You can't walk down the street.
I know,
without
there's
seeing
so many
numbers.
fucking
just
numbers.
because Tuvok infiltrated an enemy ship doesn't mean that Tendi can't penetrate a Starfleet-owned ship. You know what I'm saying? It
Tendi?
doesn't. Well, I'm sorry,
Mariner.
Tuvok, when he infiltrated the Maquis,
yeah.
so they would. They did. It's not the same. It's like you could infiltrate the Maquis. That doesn't mean you're going to invade your own ship.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a weak example. It works.
Weak.
It works in the flow of writing, and that happens sometimes where you use what you can use because if they had referenced some of the more obscure versions, it might not have worked as well. But it does. These things do stand out in a show that does take such care to be accurate in its references. But it's nothing new to Star Trek. In order to convey the story you want to tell, you're going to have to fudge it a little.
Fudge it.
On the sides.
Put a little fudge on it.
Some Gumato fudge.
I really like the speaking of Gumato fudge.
Yes.
I thought the atmosphere on Frylon 4 was fantastic.
Do you think that was named after Fry from Futurama?
Or Stephen Fry from everything.
Yeah.
Or Lon Chaney.
Why did they have to mention that they weren't indigenous to the planet? That had nothing to do with the plot.
Because that's a canon thing. Because in a private
They
little
don't belong
war,
there.
I forget the name of the planet, but the private little war, they were native to that planet, which was a different planet.
Okay.
Because those people were all surprised at those Mugars.
So they were just trying to stay.
Mugars.
So they were just trying to stay canon.
Yes, they were trying
Word
to be
of the day is canon.
Consistent with canon, and we mentioned the Kirk-like PowerPoint canon that they have at the end.
Yeah,
Not
not
a
that.
cannon,
Not the diamond
Taco
bazooka. Not Taco Bell's cannon. That's a bell, not a cannon.
It's actually a Chacon.
But the animation in this show is really fantastic, and it's been great. But you can see them just getting a little bit more clever, more comfortable, more creative with it. And this planet, with the atmosphere it had, because they were able to make the Gumatos really scary, but also sympathetic. They had those little flowers that glowed at night. So instead of moonlight, when they were walking around at night, they had the trees had those little
I'll have to watch that again.
jellyfish-looking flowers that were illuminating things. Really alien stuff that you would like to see on a show, but often didn't because they had to just get a fern or something in a pot and some rubber rocks.
Cool mountains.
Yeah.
I liked how they animated the Mugatos. They when they'd come and roar, they looked fierce, and it was like frightening. And it was a little misleading at the beginning because back to my issues with perspective, like with that skull. In that episode where the skull didn't melt, melting. Anyway, that one.
Kayshawn, his eyes.
Yeah.
Kayshawn, his penis unfurled.
The first time they see it after they're all talking about some Raktaginos. Yeah. Well, I think that dude who played Rutherford might have played that blowfish voice, dude. I don't know. I think so. Do you think he plays a few voices?
Wait, which blowfish?
We're talking about the Denobulans at the beginning.
Were they Denobulans?
Yeah, those were Denobuans. In fact, it was I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that this is the first time we see Denobulans on screen since Enterprise.
Oh, interesting.
And when they get scared, there's one scene where
Darbulans.
Phlox gets scared and his face all
It's
puffs
used some
up.
computer animation on his face. It's all crazy. But I can't, for some reason I have it written down that it sounds like Rutherford, and I don't know if that's true, actually. So
I don't know if it was him or not.
Yeah. I think Rutherford's been on some Bob's Burgers episodes.
Yeah. Eugene Cordero's been on a ton of stuff. The Good Place. He was on.
Oh, he's on The Good Place?
Yeah. He was on a bajillion dollar properties, I believe, along with Paul F. Tompkins and Tawny Newsome and a bunch of other people who were on this show.
So when when we first saw the Mugato, I thought it was like King Kong sized because the perspective was making it look like it was fucking enormous.
It looks cooler than it does on TOS. I mean,
it does.
Well, and then Ransom was talking about how it had the strength of 10 men. He made that joke, but do you think? I think it would be much more, even if it's not King Kong sized, even if it's a smaller size, like that must have been stronger than 10 men. I bet that was as strong as like 50 men. Because like a normal size gorilla are like so much stronger than a human.
Gorillas are no joke. Dude.
And these are bigger than gorillas.
But, they're agile and stuff.
Maybe it depends on whether it's pre or post coitus, because they might have might be a little bit tapped out.
They're venomous, and they.
I don't think that they were thinking about that at all. But speaking of coitus, apparently stroking your horn is somehow it's like I don't know if it's the Ferengi version of like the ears or if
why not
or
stroking your horn.
But he was having sex with the other one, like
and by the way, this scene caused some amount of consternation.
Some people thought it was
on the internet
too
low, too blue.
Other people were shocked but enjoyed it. I think I fall into that category. I wasn't expecting to see a couple of Mugatos getting down to it.
Yeah.
I actually wasn't surprised to see that on a cartoon at all.
So the Mugatos were
Rule 34, I guess.
Mugatos, they've already done it though. So
that's brilliant. Mike McMahon's brilliant. He's like, we're gonna
preempt all that.
Preempt this, like with the shower scene a few episodes back.
Yeah. So when the Mugatos were having sex, they would have sex in the way you'd expect, like a gorilla-sized thing or whatever to have sex. But then randomly, unlike gorillas, they also have a pleasure zone in their tusk that I guess is maybe just for maybe it's like rubbing the nipples or something. I don't know.
Similar to how there were limits on, say, TNG or Deep Space Nine to what you could practically do with both the budget and technology at the time in terms of world building. I suspect that though Lower Decks is animated and it is targeted at an adult audience, they still have some constraints. One of those constraints being you can't have a Mugato just cranking down on his cock.
Yeah. So they wanted to get the message across that he was masturbating, but they didn't want to show.
And it was funny.
Gumato.
Yeah, it was funny.
But yeah, so the whole rubbing on the horn bone.
What about that
rubbing on the
Ferengi
horn
guy that
bone.
was like he had like a
Mugato
pelt with like the horn, and he like was wearing like a disguise.
He was rocking
a
it.
Gumato disguise.
I like that.
Those Ferengis, so they had that electro whip or the energy whip.
I've got a permit to whip you.
Which was like from the last Outpost.
Yeah. Mariner has that great line. I get that you guys are like being some Last Outpost style Ferengi.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Creepy
some
Last
creepy
Outpost.
throwback Last Outpost Ferengi. And this is subtle.
Haven't you heard of Quark?
Yeah, she goes.
Of course I've heard of Quark.
Yeah, he goes. She goes. You ever heard of Quark? And the dude goes, of course I've heard of Quark.
Yeah. Quark.
I thought that was good.
That's how that guy says.
He says like Quark, Quark.
Wallace Shawn.
And so there's the whips. They've all got those whips. And there's that one Ferengi at one point when Shax is in recovering in the cell in the cage, and this Ferengi just walks by and brandishes his whip, goes, and he just goes, and like walks away. And that's his whole role in that little part.
It's a throwback to the Lost Outpost Ferengi, but in the context, because it's meant to be somewhat humorous, it redeems them in some way. And subtly, even though it's played as a joke, subtly introduces or certainly confirms the idea of more variety in Ferengi culture than we are traditionally familiar with.
Point.
We were introduced to a bit of variety on Deep Space Nine, but most of that was in terms of real significant breaking with the social culture, like Quark's mother Moogie wanting to wear clothes and doing business, and Rom not being good at business but being really good at engineering. Hints at that there are other things that Ferengi can pursue if they're given the opportunity. But similar to what Enterprise did with the Klingons, because in Enterprise there's a great storyline where Archer is dealing with this Klingon lawyer. And the Klingon lawyer is
Klingon lawyer.
Yeah, and what's great about that whole thing is that just to condense it down a little bit, that Klingon lawyer describes how Klingon culture had plenty of scientists and lawyers and doctors, and those were considered important jobs. But at the time of Enterprise, he was lamenting that it seemed that the honor of those jobs was receding, predicting what we would see later in TOS and TNG, where it had gotten much more warlike. And they were making
Discovery.
The important point saying don't stereotype Klingons, because Star Trek makes this mistake for dramatic reasons, of course, but it's still it's an unfortunate side effect of the dramatic simplification that they create whole societies, planetary or even galactic empire societies that are relatively homogenous, and that is helpful from a storytelling perspective, but it is unfortunate from a messaging perspective of suggesting that such a thing exists.
Right,
extreme homogeneity within a particular group.
I mean,
of people.
even architecture and things like that.
Yes.
Depending, it would be cool if they had some more books, like if they had some like a technical manual, except for like cultures and stuff. If they had like books laying out the whole detail.
There may be something like that.
Of Kronos or something like that.
Because what it is that you need design elements and character elements that signify that this is the group of people, this is the type of people you're interacting with. You also need certain people to fill a role as the warrior race, the sneaky race, the greedy race, in order to serve as foils for your plots. But where I think Star Trek is best, and a lot of it's more modern Star Trek, but Deep Space Nine did a good job with this too, a little bit of Enterprise, and I think Lower Decks is doing a great job with it, is demonstrating through Tendi, through the different Ferengi we've seen, that while the stereotypes might exist, that they're not necessarily accurate, and that you can still convey the design elements. For example, of you can go someplace and say that's Bajoran or that's Klingon, but it doesn't have to immediately be associated with the things you would associate with Bajorans or Klingons. Like it could be a market or something like that.
Maybe you could say that the reason planets are so homogenous now is because it's no longer, the division isn't so much countries anymore. It's different planets now. And that's sort of like the inevitability kind of when you branch out and when your scope becomes bigger, because they say like, well, what could bring humanity together? Oh, an alien attack could bring humanity together, because we have a common enemy to fight for. And so now we're talking about on a universal scale. So instead of countries, we have whole planets. Now I know it wouldn't erase it entirely, but there would be more of a uniform goal on each planet.
My pushback to that concept would simply be, I think that there's a difference between a temporary unification towards a single purpose versus when that is resolved, people will go back. It'll be different than before. Maybe you have new alliances. Maybe you've shuffled things around a little. But once that, like the alien threat to Earth is the classic example that you brought up. But once that alien threat is resolved in one way or another, it's not like people are going to be like, okay, because of that, now we're all friends.
Well, right. No, and I know what you're saying, but it wouldn't. But the very fact that if you kept up, diplomatic relations or whatever you want to call it, that in itself is kind of like it never ends. It's like the war never ends because you're just, even if it's just a friend, even if it's an alliance, even if you're best buddies,
I just think
it's
that
still the idea of a larger scope.
I'm just happy that we have more in Lower Decks and a few other examples.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm happy that we're moving away from I think it's a flawed concept.
No,
we don't know because we haven't gotten to that stage.
Like I said 5 minutes ago, I think it would be awesome if there was like a book that was created, and they wouldn't have to incorporate it into Star Trek, but just like for someone to go deep dive into how they think different parts of Klingons would act on different parts of Kronos or something like that.
As we know, it would be a real problem if somebody wanted to have a homogenous stereotype of the United States or Russia or Croatia or something like that. Because obviously there are going to be differences within that would be interesting to play around with, but from a dramatic perspective in a fictional world, it's a lot easier to just say like, okay, no, these people are like this, so if you see them, you should be scared, or if you see them, you should know they're the heroes or whatever,
It seems like there's a tendency in Star Trek in general to have different aliens gradually be accepted into the mainstream and thereby become influenced by it. Like the Klingons aren't the enemy by TNG and beyond TNG. The Klingons aren't strictly the enemy of the Federation anymore. They're sometimes they're allies and sometimes they're not. And the other alliances change up and stuff. Or like the Romulans, like their planet gets destroyed and there's like a Romulan diaspora. We find that out later in Picard. So the Romulans are spread out around the galaxy. So Romulans are changing as they are dispersed around the galaxy.
Some of them are hanging out on Earth in vineyards.
They're hanging out on various planets. They're hanging out on their own little worlds where they're all kind of like get all weird and territorial. And
of course, many people would argue that is a subtle or not so subtle, some people may argue, issue with Star Trek is that it does tend to take a position. The position may vary depending on the producers and the writers, the core of it, but it tends to take a position as being right and that it's great when Rom thinks that it's great to start a union.
Right.
Now, I'm pro that. Me personally, I think it's awesome when Rom starts a union on Deep Space Nine. Other people would argue that is a sort of a negative influence. The Ferengi,
Isn't that? And then like
Quark would argue that was bad.
like O'Brien's all like, my father was a union man. He's all pro union, and then like Worf is like, what the fuck is this union shit? Fuck.
Yeah. Well, they haven't gotten there with Cardassians yet. The closest we get is Garrick, and that dude is, as far as like being a good guy, he's the sketchiest good guy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
They haven't
Caused a lot of
Sketchy.
So it would be
shadiness.
interesting to see a more sympathetic side to Cardassians, I would suppose.
I think Cardassia is a great example where they do a little of it in Deep Space Nine, but unfortunately, so much of it is not stuff we actually see. We hear about the
right.
civilians, and we hear about that the military government is not necessarily like supported by the population and stuff, but we don't see it.
You know, it would be awesome to like play one of those pen and paper games like Dungeons and Dragons. Do you think there's
You had me already at
pen and paper? Where that was going, and it's like exploring Konos or something, and it's like on your own way, you're discovering all these different sort of aspects of like.
I'm sure somebody made one of them.
I keep going back to Klingons for whatever reason, but I'm just so fascinated.
Klingon culture has a lot to be interested in.
Yeah, so I wonder if they have like a pen and paper Star Trek style game. I think you can. There's a system you can make your own. Basically,
There was a Star Trek like role playing game, like a D&D style role playing game.
Okay.
It wasn't like official Star Trek, but it was Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, I knew a guy that when I worked at this place, I knew a guy who was so into pen and paper games, he would like make his own and stuff. And so I guess once you do it enough, you get good at this. Because you're already kind of, there's the meta idea of being the dungeon master, and going even more meta than that is to create your own rules within that
I've
world.
come up with a couple,
Of what?
of games.
Like campaigns or
Or no, like games.
oh, you made some? You made some?
Yeah.
Oh, that's tight.
All right, well then,
But way back in the day.
okay, we'll task you with creating the Star Trek pen and paper game, and then we will happily play it.
You know, the best leaders
All
don't
right.
want best leaders don't want to be leaders, so we're gonna. But
That was the
thing
thing. I just wanted to play. I didn't want to be the game master. I wanted to fucking play the game.
Yeah, right. That's the thing.
But
Someone's gonna make it.
Lower Decks is doing a lot in such small, compact stories, limited time, but through the storytelling and through the animation and background jokes and multi-layered stuff, it's amazing to me how much they're able to add to the universe under the cover of this jokey, humorous vibe that they're doing. And the Ferengi here is a great example. We're seeing a different type of Ferengi, Last Outpost style Ferengi. They are still able to be negotiated with and have a Star Trek style conclusion where
The Ferengi we see in the first season of Lower Decks. That's
he
like,
pretends to be like
he
that.
pretends to be like that.
Does the thing with his fingers
Yeah.
and everything.
Oh yeah.
All right. So anything else on that particular one, or because we should talk about the Tendi plot before we close up shop.
What about the lowest tractor factor?
Yes, the tractor factor was a good thing.
I just wanted to mention that one part, one of the Ferengis was like, "Stay your whip," and all you could think of is like, "There's so much whip action going on in this episode. It's
brilliant.
everywhere."
That's all they got is whip.
They're just like flicking whips around everywhere and doing shit. And they even fucked them. That's how they fucked themselves up, is with their whip. And they hit that control
Yeah, like
panel.
Rutherford totally dodges that whip because he's
Yeah.
in fucking Starfleet.
he's a cyborg.
Yeah.
He's got that cyborg action.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
With an LCARS interface, because when you see stuff from his perspective, it's all Star Trek LCARS style
Yeah.
So-
graphics.
He was spotting all kinds
So,
of stuff.
but to summarize, basically, the compromise they reached from at the end, it was the reason it was a compromise was because the Ferengi didn't want to release their captives, and Boimler and Rutherford don't get to arrest them for attacking Starfleet. So they're both kind of.
And
They
note,
totally could have gotten it.
note that as far as we're led to believe, Freeman and Ransom are never informed of any of this. Not by Shax, Mariner, anybody.
Oh, right.
They
yeah,
all just sort
yeah.
of agree to go off book on this.
They're like, we found some Ferengi that were just interested in making a Murmok preserve.
And you could, there's,
Oh, yeah.
I could see people being upset with this resolution by saying, well, why would you let these terrible Ferengi?
And it was
that were doing this awful stuff-
kind of weird because the Ferengi were saying we work for the Mugatos. Now I understand they work for profit. They
Yes.
don't work for the Mugatos. So it's like kind of like putting an eco spin. Well, I mean, Freeman herself said something about they're eco-friendly Ferengi, but that was a joke at like, no, they're not eco-friendly. They just want to make more money. But then they go like, we work for the Mugatos, which is not something you say.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at, in that I understand that there is rational criticism against this solution about not punishing these Ferengi for what appears to be fairly brutal stuff they've been doing in terms of killing and harvesting the horns off of these Mugato.
What do you said? Their horns or tusks? I guess it was decided they were horns.
He was like, it can be whatever you want it to be. So I appreciate that.
They snorted some horn and got superpowers.
I agree. I agree to a large extent. However, I am also very convinced by the argument
Gumato
that
brothers.
in reality, in a practical reality, sometimes you have to go with what's actually going to result in the best outcome. Mm-hmm. And it's not something I'd like to support, but sometimes I think you have to support it. And in this case, that's what they get because they've changed the incentive structure. They've been able to say, okay, your previous incentive structure is you capture these things, you breed them, and then you murder them, and you make money selling their bits and pieces. Now, Rutherford and Boimler have shifted the incentive structure to a better incentive structure, but in this case, the incentive structure is they have to make this place as awesome for Mugatos as possible in order to obtain.
What do you mean, good?
The wealth. Now, people will probably come back and say there are plenty of zoos and shit that are terrible to the animals, and we've seen examples of that in the news. Agreed. But this is Star Trek, and you can make some assumptions about maybe in this case, Starfleet will actually come back and check things out periodically. Not that they have in the past, like with Kirk and Khan.
I mean, I guess that's kind of why at the end he did say, like, we work for the Mugatos now, is because, like, we're conceding that if we
want to make money, we got to make them happy.
Yeah, and they're trying to balance out the fact that they did leave these animals in the care of Ferengi, who are supposedly, and we're left to think, oh, they're going to take care of them. They're not going to take care of them. But then when he says we work for the Mugatos, I guess that was the way to sort of compromise on that issue.
And it's a shorthand. Again, it's a bit of a dramatic shorthand to convey exactly what you suggested, which is we want to leave this episode feeling confident that these Mugatos are going to be well taken care of. Yep. And that's intended to convey that. We can debate it, but...
That's intendi.
It's intendi. But yeah.
Speaking of Tendi, that was cool when Tendi was chasing that cat in a coat around.
I really this was
off a coat. This was the Jeffries tubes.
It's another example of what was a super predictable B plot. You knew exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
You knew there was going to be the doc. I just knew, immediately I knew that at some point she was going to have to scan the doctor because it's an old trope that doctors don't like to go to the doctor.
What was the deal with
I'm the doctor.
Patient 08.1019?
That's her serial number.
It said on the.
It was on like the office plaque.
Yeah, it was like her
Office
serial
plaque.
number on the office.
That was
plaque.
her serial number. So she didn't really do a great job of hiding her name because she made something within plain sight.
This is a plot you have to stretch a little bit. Why would the computer not have her name? Okay, you could say she edited it out.
It's Starfleet. Everybody knows what everybody sees these serial numbers all the time in Starfleet. And you're like, you can easily look that up and be like, well, wait a minute, what does that mean?
You have to look over a few things for this plot to make sense, and one of them being she can not delete the record, but she can delete her name from the record. Dr. Tana can do that. Okay, it's plausible, but it seems a little weird, but it works for the plot. You knew what was going to happen, but it didn't matter, in my opinion, because there are all sorts of great tropey stories that if they're told well and if they're performed well, then it's totally fine. And I think that's the case here because...
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could say the same about like music. Like, they always joke about, music's all the same 3 chords or whatever. But even if a lot of it is, it's the sort of the sound and the way you put into it. There's a lot more that goes into it.
With a few ingredients... All you got to do is you got to be a good cook.
You can just take an egg.
with that French mother sauce or God sauce or whatever they call it. What do they call it in French?
I don't know what you're talking about.
They're mother sauces.
It sounds good.
They're mother sauces. I'm now intrigued by the concept of God sauces. I'm going to try them out. But so we knew where the story was going to go, but it was fun to see Tendi dealing with the various people, which I thought it was just messing up everyone's day.
Yeah, she fucked everyone's shit up.
And again, a subtle message. It's played for a joke. It's funny to see her go around scanning people and causing them trouble, especially when Stevens broke his hip because he wasn't drinking enough milk.
Yeah,
and he was trying to hit on that officer.
But Tendi's going to be she's going to be persistent.
She's tenacious. She's tenacious.
And tenacious, yeah.
Well, this is the second time. Tana's always sending Tendi on some missions, right? So the time was to get that post, but it was funny because Tana's like, it's the joke there was that it's so easy nobody wants to get it. Maybe it's because they don't want to be reduced to numbers. That was the joke. But she was saying this is simple, but it turned this is so easy, just do it. But it turned out every person she went to with Stevens, she blew up his spot with that person by talking about his brittle bones. And Jet
He was just hitting on some Ensign.
yeah, and she blew it up. And then Jet Manhaver gets punched in the face because she distracts him. And then she knocks over Chief Lars Lundy.
Yeah, Lars Lundy.
And his passenger on his shoulders.
She was hang gliding.
No, they were surfing.
Yeah, I know, but Tendi hang glided in.
Yeah, Tendi hang glided in, yeah. And so, and they were wearing some kind of old school looking swimsuit too,
Jet
with
was
the hair.
Jet was fighting that Kayshawn guy.
Yeah, that's right. Did you something about the girl's hair and their swimsuit looked really old school.
I'll have to go back and check it out.
But yeah, and then she knocked them all over. So it turns out it wasn't something so simple. I guess it's just saying they made it harder on themselves in the end.
To me, again, what I was going to say is that even though it's played for a joke, there's still a subtle moral in there, which is don't delay the stuff you got to take care of because it's going to cause you shit later.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to, and Tendi is the ultimate example of that. And again, here, this is nothing new, but it's a new example of it. She's tenacious Tendi. She is maniacal when it comes to getting things done. And it's this interesting interplay between her insecurities and her devotion to doing a good job.
She's like Peggy Hill.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, she's kind of like Peggy Hill in some ways. But I mean, I was watching this and I was like, oh man, we do not want to deal with Mirror Universe Tendi, or we don't want to deal with angry Tendi, because if you get on her wrong side, she's gonna fuck you up. Yeah. And of course, with the ultimate joke being her having to chase down Dr. Ta'ana, who acts just like a cat, hiding under the bed and scratching at people. And I was just so delighted watching that whole scene. And then Tendi breaks her arm. And then Dr. Ta'ana's like, that old gag. And then he's just got a compound fracture, just like bones sticking out.
Yeah, and then the joke there is when Tana's like, that was actually kind of quick. I don't know why I made such a big thing of it. It's like, you're the doctor.
But again and again and again, we are seeing all these people, Dr. Ta'ana, Captain Freeman, they are highly competent. They're Starfleet officers, but they are not the elite, right? Yeah. They are making errors, or they're not considering things. And Captain Freeman's it's a brief little C subplot with that Hyde character. But again, she's focused on the wrong things, and so she's missing the obvious scam in front of her. Yeah. She's missing that they're not in communication with their away team, and this guy flies up, and maybe he's involved in something. You know, they're showing us that they're capable of making mistakes, and Ta'ana is an example of that. That's why we're on the Cerritos and not on the Enterprise or the Titan.
I read an article where somebody was saying, like, it was funny, the Tana shit was funny, but like, let's hope they were saying that, like, let's hope they don't keep this gag up because it might get old, like her being a cat. And and I was thinking, like, I don't know if it's gonna get old or not. Like, we're gonna have to see. Like it's pretty good so far.
Yeah, right.
Like, they could keep doing this gag where she totally goes total cat. Full on cat. Like, it might not get old. Like, I don't know. Let's see how they do it.
Yeah, so far it's been pretty funny.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't remember Tana and Shax being a thing. They were
at the end of the last episode. They were hinting at it. Yeah,
in the first
season.
First season. Yeah, there were some hints that there was something.
Yeah, there's a bunch of shit I forget. It's
a sexy show.
It is a sexy show.
There's some hot cartoons.
And
colorful.
And the cat thing is going to be interesting because we've been dealing with Ta'ana, who's a Cation. But in this episode, we see a Zinti, or Kzinti, 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 which is the other cat creature from TAS, from the animated series. I think they're the more warlike ones, that they have the webbed ears things. We see him in the bar right at the beginning of the episode. Background character, but sometimes the background characters they're just showing us that there's a variety of people there.
Every sort of like world that's created has some kind of humanoid cat creature. Star Trek now has two.
Star Trek has two, and they've had two for a long time because in TAS they had two.
You always want some kind of humanoid cat,
and
the next choice would be a humanoid dog.
It was like that show Red Dwarf.
Or a lizard.
Red Dwarf, there was a cat that evolved to like.
He just looked like a vampire.
Yeah, he just looked like a vampire, right?
That guy was so awesome.
I wonder, I don't want to presume, but I wonder if they're introducing us to the
Danny John
Kzinti
Jules
character because there will be some conflict at some point in the future, this season or in a future season, between Cation, Ta'ana, and these Kzinti folks, because they are different, and they could do a good story about stereotyping or confusing people who come from different groups, conflating them together unfairly, because doing that with two cat alien creatures, I think you could do a pretty interesting story with that. Anything else about the Tendi storyline, or shall we move along to odds and ends?
I'm good for smoobs and boobs.
Let's do some snurbs and gerbs.
So
Mugatos and Filatos.
we touched on the Mugato sex disturbing some folks on the internet. We got an email from our old friend Tarek, who also conveyed.
That guy's cool.
He was like, "What the fuck did I just watch?" But I if I interpreted his email correctly, I do think he fell into the category of being entertained by it if thrown off, and I certainly fell into that. I was like, I did not expect this. Jesse apparently was. Totally
I don't know.
expecting
I just didn't. I was like, okay, well, this isn't the most Star Trek thing to happen, but it certainly is not out of place in like a comedy cartoon.
I wasn't offended by it, but I
was not offended.
I thought it was funny, and then the whole having one guy show up and just start jerking off that was extra funny, and just just having somebody in Star Trek say, "I think he just likes to watch."
Yeah, right.
In that context,
snuggling with them afterwards.
I know, right? They're all like, and then people were talking about in Freeman's shelf. She has a pineapple. Now,
she's got a Gorn doll.
Some people were talking about the fact that the pineapple traditionally
it's a bronze pineapple.
It's a bronze pineapple. Now, some people were on the internet were talking about how the pineapple is a symbol of the swinger lifestyle. And people often will hang a sign or a pineapple flag or use pineapple elements to indicate subtly to people that they are into swinging.
I didn't know that.
And swinging, by swinging, I mean partner swapping is one other way to put it, or some sort of group
I think everyone
love
knows
situation.
what it is.
I just want to make it clear, just so we're all working, operating on the
swapping.
same. Yes, presumably that's part of
yeah.
the deal.
Okay.
So some people were saying maybe that's indicating that Captain Freeman's into swinging. However, while I think that would be funny, and I think they could definitely play with that idea, and that would be interesting and cool, the pineapple has also historically, at least since maybe the 1800s or something, been a symbol of that. It's been something that's been given to people as a diplomatic exchange,
And it's an architectural device in a lot of design.
Do you want to know what else they had on that shelf?
They had a Nautilus shell.
Yes.
They had
Gorn doll.
A Gorn doll, which is interesting
Johnny Gorn?
because they had a Gorn.
Johnny Gorn.
They had a Gorn doll. Gorn dong. They had a Gorn doll, but then later they had that projector that looked like the bazooka that shot the Gorn, the diamond bazooka or whatever. So there's there's a lot of references to Gorn, and they didn't play that big of a role in the series. So
Well, they go to that. There's that Gorn wedding.
Yes, the Gorn wedding
right,
in the first season is good.
yeah, it's mostly lower decks. They
have a little ship. She has a
little
model ship.
Mm-hmm.
Many of these things are mirroring things that were in either the Enterprise D or Enterprise
she has
E.
She has a plaque, a sword, some kind of hat. She's got this samurai inspired helmet on some kind of doll thing.
Yeah.
She's got some vials of stuff, and she's got an abacus. I think that's an abacus.
That green motherfucker takes all those things.
Yeah, he does.
Until she takes them back.
She totally takes them back.
Lowest tractor factor.
Mugatu genitals are sensitive to phaser fire.
Yeah. I thought my genitals were sensitive.
I was going to say that too. When Shaq said that, I was like, I think mine probably are too. It's a funny thing to point out, Mr. Shax.
Maybe Bajoran genitals are not.
I think that was the joke, wasn't it? Wasn't that the joke? Is that it was a ridiculous thing to say?
Yes.
The Bajorans are not.
Yes.
They got tough balls.
Yeah, you're right. Fair point. I just wanted to talk about genitals on the
genitals
on the podcast.
Yeah. Because we didn't get to see genitals when he was masturbating.
We just got him rubbing some horn. And he was rubbing that horn pretty vigorously.
He was definitely getting into it. You could tell he was really enjoying it.
And well practiced, too.
Yeah. So
the technique was stellar.
Oh yeah, Mariner. Okay, she's got a lisp. I remember when there was another person I was talking about having a lisp once, and I can't remember who it was. That they only sometimes had a lisp. Sometimes had a lisp. And I can't remember what show that was. But if we look through the archives of our episodes, we can find it.
All right. We'll spend all weekend. We'll listen to all previous 92 episodes.
So this is after they transport down. This is after they transport down, and Shax is about to eat some shit. And she goes,
literally.
Yeah. She goes, yo, it's pretty clear we're going.
Gumato.
She goes, yo, it's pretty clear we're going in the right direction. You don't have to. But she lisps one of those words. She goes, it's pretty clear that we're going in the right. I can't remember where she lisped.
Maybe it was an artifact of the fact that all these voice actors, including Tawny Newsome, were recording things in their closets at home during COVID.
I remember what it was. It was, yo, it's pretty clear. She said, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear.
I will go back and review it,
and
then we'll come back and do a whole podcast about it.
Most voice acting is just one-on-one. I mean, somebody's just doing their lines. You're not interacting with the
That's
other.
generally true in the industry. There are a few shows that work to get the actors together to interplay with each other.
The only reason it's noteworthy is because it's not something she normally has. And it's just interesting that they're changed.
And that's what qualifies it for the odds and ends section.
Yeah.
You all could write in and contact us and let us know your thoughts on Lispgate.
Lispgate.
I think that's the show.
Okay, well, if we're going on, the Ferengi says at one point about getting a hold of these Mugatos. He goes, they're whatever you want them. Oh yeah, he's talking about if it's a horn or a tusk. He goes, they're whatever you want to. They're whatever you want them to be, as long as your latinum's gold pressed.
Yeah.
Why is latinum gold pressed anyways?
I know
That's
the
like
answer.
the least important part. And why does he care if it's gold pressed?
I know the answer as to why it's gold pressed, but I'm.
Who cares what
it
they're
may
pressed
not
with?
answer your specific.
Yeah, so I mean, but I guess they just picked gold, but arbitrarily. But why does it matter what it's pressed? That's the least important part.
But
The most
latinum
It's
important
just a play on
But
words.
latinum in a liquid form, I think, is more problematic to transport.
Yeah,
is
but you
the
put
It's
in
all wibbly wobbly.
You put in some aluminum or something.
But it's you're also,
Aluminum pressed latinum. What's the matter with you?
what the fuck? No, seriously, what the fuck is your problem? No, you have to consider the convenience of trade, because it's not just if you gave me a bunch of gold and it was just a big old sack of molten gold, that's great. It's technically gold. It technically has a value. But now I'm going to have to expend effort and, as a result, capital in order to convert it into a form that somebody else is going to accept.
I get that.
'Cause it's all
That makes
blue-bly.
sense.
Either I'm going to give it to somebody...
It's like in a beaker. You gave it to him in a beaker, dude.
I would have to take, if I gave it to somebody to convert it into usable form, they would take a cut, or I would have to do the process myself, which would take time and effort, which counts as money.
Okay, and that's a good point. That's a solid point.
I've got a wallet full of euros right now. I could give you 50 euros and that's great. But
Yes.
then you'd have to go to the exchange place
You have to go to fucking Europe, dude.
But if
or to the bank.
But if you get-
and be like, give me dollar version of it.
but if you gave me enough euros, I wouldn't give a shit.
Go buy me a bunch of chocolate.
Point being is I'm sure
I agree
Ferengi
with
would
you.
not turn down latinum even if it
Absolutely.
was not gold pressed.
he
They
might
wouldn't turn
ask,
it down.
he might ask for more
Go get some orangina.
to accommodate the extra effort.
I
into
think the more
converting.
appropriate thing to have said would have been, as long as your gold has filled with latinum.
Wait, say that again.
I said has filled. Has filled.
Because you've taken a poetic statement as long as your latinum is gold pressed, which is reversing the usual thing, which is a nice
I
poetic
said
thing
as
to do.
long as your gold is filled with latinum.
Is filled.
That's not what you said, but
As long
that
as your as long as your gold has filled with latinum.
See,
Has filled.
that's what you said.
I didn't mean to say that.
Been filled?
Has filled. I didn't mean to say that, but like
we
it
understand
works.
that.
It works.
It doesn't work.
It does. Has filled.
Has filled with your gold has filled.
It's a
the gold,
state-
like
the gold is the
Pennsylvania song?
subject of the thing, so the
It's-
gold is the one performing the action. The gold has filled. The gold can't. The gold is an inanimate object. It cannot perform.
It has
an
filled.
animate action.
It's a state of being. It's has filled.
Has been filled.
No.
disagree.
Has
Has been filled kind of works.
No.
At least works grammatically.
No.
Okay.
It
I
has
think
filled.
we've reached an impasse.
The gold has filled with it's been filled with Latin. Fuck you guys.
I don't. Is it? What is it? So latinum's a liquid.
Latinum's a liquid,
and you put it inside a bar of gold.
You mix it with gold. You mix it with gold, which converts it into a solid form and makes it easy to have the slips and the strips and the bars and the bricks.
But gold is shit. And
yes, gold. They don't give a fuck about gold.
Latinum is where
you can
it's
replicate
at.
gold.
Yeah, you can replicate gold, right?
The whole point with latinum is that you can't replicate it, and that's why it can serve as
Can it be
limited
cloaked?
resource.
Can it be cloaked?
I'm sure you can cloak it.
Why would that?
To hide it.
It's different types of technology. You can't replicate it, but can you cloak it?
Okay, fair enough.
I'm sure. Who knows? It's a
enough.
question. It's an open question.
Can it be transported?
I'm sure it can be transported.
transmuted?
It definitely can be transported because otherwise it would suck every time you transport it somewhere and you're like, oh shit, my money.
It's a non-transportable token.
Oh fuck. All right. Any other odds and ends?
I just wanted to say that Rutherford says that they have a signal dampener, not damper. Now, this may not count though, because that might only apply the dampener debate.
To the inertial damper.
May only apply to inertial, but still.
Please refer to previous episodes of this podcast for that ongoing debate about the interchangeability in Star Trek of inertial damper and inertial dampener.
So the question is, has any of them ever said signal damper? Because they've said inertial damper, inertial dampener, signal dampener, but have they said signal damper?
Yeah.
Have they said dampeners?
Dampeners. Only Spock said that shit.
We will. I don't know, Dan. So we're gonna have to. No, I'm interested. I
don't know why that was funny the way you said that. You're just like, I don't know, Dan.
No, I'm serious. I want to know. Unfortunately, I think that means we'll have to either watch all of Star Trek to check that, or which would be fine because we're doing that anyway.
That's what we're gonna do.
Or listeners could write in at feedback@itsgotstartrek.com and let us know if you know of any examples of them saying a signal dampener or dampener or damper.
That seems
like they've said one
some
or
kind
more
of talk on Voyager. They would have some kind of signal.
You gotta blunt some signals
because they're always trying to send some signal on Voyager, like back to the Alpha Quadrant.
So I know we're trying to end the episode, so I'll just rapid fire machine gun this. So Stevens is obsessing about ransom again. Was he doing that? Was he that blatant last season? I don't think I remember him. Stevens ransom thing.
It was a little bit towards the end. I think that they kind of started to introduce that idea a little bit.
I thought it was cool. There was a ship shot. They were talking, and you saw the planet in the background, and there was like electro storms going on the planet. Yes. You could see
subtle, and it was fairly subtle lightning and stuff.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Again, the animation and atmosphere is fantastic.
Yeah, and also, how does a Mugato sting someone? Because that's what happened. Mariner was sucking.
A Mugato has venomous fangs.
Yeah.
That has fangs.
So when it bites you.
Okay,
so
it's
the Gumato, if it bites down on you.
So stinging is kind of weird and misleading because, like,
it does not have a stinger.
It doesn't have a stinger.
Yeah. The horn is not venomous.
Yeah,
it's got
teeth.
fangs.
The teeth. So it's not. It's kind of weird way to word it. And also Kerplickian lice. I like the
Kerplickian.
Yeah, I think that's a Lower Decks original.
But I also think
I like that there's still originals on the show.
Of course, and they do a lot of original stuff. And that brings up an important point, which is that Mariner, her explanation of why she got so good at martial arts in particular, right?
Oh, yeah.
is great because it's both a meta commentary, a meta response to the some segment of the fan base, or maybe you can't call them fans or whatever, but some people complain, say like, oh, Mariner knows all this. Why does she know all this stuff? This story references that and then undercuts that argument because they give such an elegant answer, which is she's fucking lonely. She's lonely and she has these sort of social anxiety issues and concerns that of course, like, she would want to pick activities that she could hone on her own.
What I would say to that though, and I agree, but the only thing I'd say about that is martial arts, unless you're practicing forms or techniques,
holodecks,
and then that brings me to my next point. Then what's preventing her from playing tennis with a holodeck partner? Why does it specifically have to be martial arts?
Touché.
Maybe
three
Well, who the fuck likes tennis?
paper mache.
Paper mache. Yeah.
I like ping pong.
Well, maybe she is good at
Ping
tennis.
pong ain't tennis.
Or racquetball. I think they call it table tennis these days.
Yeah,
because
it's table tennis.
Ping pong was just some racist name they
is
came
it?
up with. Because like
Yeah, I should've known.
the Chinese called it table tennis, and a bunch of white people were like, "Let's call it ping pong."
Yeah.
Right,
I
they
mean,
could have called it like.
maybe I'm wrong about that.
No,
I'm not gonna get
ma-
mad at people for saying ping pong.
It sounds
I should say
racist.
table.
I
It does,
just-
yeah. Well, that makes you racist because you think it sounds racist. That's the
I think it
reversal
makes me
argument.
not racist.
when
Yeah, I agree.
when I listen to professional Chinese table tennis players
Table tennis.
talking about the sport, they always refer to it as table tennis, and I'm like, oh yeah, because
Dude.
they're because white people are just racist.
It's got to be a little bit easier than tennis because tennis is all like running the fuck around.
Tennis is a difficult
Your
sport.
ass runs around.
But the
back
argument,
and
the
forth.
counter argument, Dan, could be that Mariner is interested in doing an activity, but she's also practical and she has this the rumor she set up that she was a black ops person was for the purpose of getting people scared of her. So building up her martial skills makes sense. Being good at weapons, both projectile weapons and hand-to-hand combat and fighting with a batleth and stuff like that. It makes sense for somebody who is trying to protect themselves psychologically and sets up these barriers so that the only people that can be her friends are the ones that sort of ignore or don't notice or refuse to acknowledge the barriers she's set up and just force themselves into her lives, which I think is very true of Boimler, Rutherford, and Tendi.
That was funny when they both threw their tricorders at her because she caught it the first time. I didn't even get what was my slow ass didn't even get what was going on at first. I was like, why'd they throw their tricorders at him? And then they had to. They had to. I was one of those people. The show had to explain the joke to that you complain about because you're like, oh, they should trust us with the humor and and I was like, I just didn't get. And then when I got it, I started laughing because it was funny and because silly because I'm silly.
I think we've done a lot better job of talking about this episode and talking about different aspects of this episode than some of the articles I read, some of the entertainment journalism.
You know, brains are inside of our skins.
I laughed at that. It's such a silly joke. I agree with you, Jesse. You know, there's a lot of good articles and stuff out there, but I've noticed that one issue I think in sort of the public discourse is that there is an understandable effort to get the content and analysis out there as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And we're no different. You know, we're recording this the day after the show airs.
They do this with sports. Sports
just
writers
get it right out there.
They'll finish the article before the game's over. They'll write a few different versions as the game's going on.
And in one sense that can be good because you want to read and interact and discuss things. But on the other hand, I think they miss a lot because they haven't taken the time. Maybe they haven't watched the episode enough. You got to be a real nerd and watch these episodes like 2, 3, 4 times.
A few times.
Particularly Lower Decks. I mean, you can get away with fewer watches of maybe Discovery or Picard or an older episode, but Lower Decks is so dense.
It's really dense.
And there hasn't been a single episode, either previous season or this season, when we're covering this, that I didn't learn stuff or get stuff revealed to me during recording the podcast because you all noticed something, or we get an email where somebody noticed something. And I think that's really great, but it does impact. I've started to not read the stuff that comes out the day of or the day after, and I wait for the stuff that comes. Sometimes even months later is the more interesting, where people have been able to ruminate. And also
that's especially true with like video games, because like when people who are really willing to write a review of an old video game, because of course it's always like you got to get that review, be the first one to review. So it's more interesting when you get a more retrospective sort of look on the whole
It's the difference between the market pressure and the intellectual pressure. The market pressure wants things out fast and it doesn't mind if they're missing stuff or even making errors. The intellectual pressure allows you a little bit more breathing room, some more time to contemplate about things and see how it all fits into the bigger picture.
There's also seems to be sort of this sort of anti-Lower Decks kind of bias that people,
is that still going on?
Well, I mean,
sometimes
it just seems like.
But do you think it's improved?
It seems like Lower Decks for some reason has to work extra hard to impress these people that are writing entertainment journalism.
That was definitely true even before it came out. People were ready to hate on the show.
They're totally ready to like. They're like, oh, it's going to be just like Rick and Morty.
Right?
For some reason.
Do you think a lot of those people have turned though and been convinced that it is?
I think some people have, but it seems like there's still like some people that are writing stuff about
there is a
It just takes like a lot for
I just
them
wonder
to be
if it-
impressed.
there's a,
by it.
fla-
wonder if
there's
it
a
gets-
flavor. I don't want to. I don't like the term elitism because I think it's not conveying exactly what I mean, and I've always had trouble with that term for a variety of reasons we can discuss on a separate.
It seems like
podcast.
there's less hate on it now.
There is less, but it's a popular show. It's a hugely popular show. Discovery is also a hugely popular show, and there's all sorts of Discovery haters who are always like, "Oh, it's canceled. Oh, it was secretly canceled 2 years ago. These shows are fake." It's,
I mean, they say the detractors are the most vocal
it's
or whatever.
QAnon style
some
lunacy,
QAnon shit,
like drinking horse semen or whatever they're doing these days
They
to
did it
not
on
get
Fear
COVID.
Factor.
Yes, yes, they did. So
Snake venom.
there is that, but honestly, on Trek Twitter, on a lot of the other sources I look at, Reddit, it's predominantly positive. And there's certainly people like us who are willing to comment and critique certain areas where maybe it falls a little short or a joke falls flat or where they miss a potential opportunity. But that the overall, I think most people are really enjoying the show. And just as somebody who's been a almost lifelong Star Trek fan at this stage, I can appreciate if this doesn't tickle the Star Trek things that people want.
Yeah, and I don't think people are obligated to like the show.
It would puzzle me to have somebody see this show and just hate it. Now, honestly, that's true of most of the Star Trek out there. There might be particular episodes where I can see, I was like, yeah, that's kind of sucks, or that message is weird, or that's contradictory to this or whatever. But that overall, there's something to like in all of that, and flavors for different people. And I think we're going to see that coming up soon with Star Trek Prodigy. Yeah. So that is a show that is explicitly geared towards children. And I honestly don't know, and I would not dare to predict what my reaction to the show will be. I don't know if it'll be a vibe that just doesn't particularly interest me, or if it's the stories are too simplistic, or if I end up loving it and maybe it turns into one of my favorite Star Trek series ever. I honestly couldn't tell you what's going to happen with that because I just don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I'll give it a chance and check it out.
Is it out?
No, it'll be coming out. We don't know exactly. I don't think they've released the date yet, but it'll be sometime after Lower Decks. I think before Discovery season 4.
Discovery is like sometime in December or something.
Something like that. Yeah. Most of that's not official yet, but will be soon. Yeah.
Lowest tractor factor.
I guess that'll conclude our discussion of this particular episode. Our wide-ranging and excellent, in my opinion. Mark it a 5. Go rate us 5 stars.
5 stars.
How about 5.5?
Mugato and Mogatu, it's like censor and censor.
Yeah.
Lumato.
Or tomato and
Morato.
tomato,
Yeah.
which is, of course, the
And then it's a joke about. Then it's the
Potato.
joke
Tomato,
about that.
tomato.
You mentioned how it was in the script differently, so it was
Yeah.
a double joke. Double joke.
Call it all off.
The desaliated paviotic fluid, that was. It looks like that was a Lower Decks invention when the nurse Tendi that medical person took control of the patient over Tendi, and she was like,
one of them
she needs,
lieutenants.
Yeah, she was like, she needs 30 cc's of desalinated paviotic fluid.
I wonder if one of them
I
was
think that's a Lower Decks invention.
Was one of them Lieutenant Escher? Because in the previous episode, Tendi was upset because Escher got promoted to
I bet it
lieutenant
was.
before her.
You know, it took me
but they didn't say by name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it took me a few episodes to figure out the difference between Stevens and Billups. And
Yes.
so I think this is the same thing going on here.
Well, we'll figure it out. So we will be back around the same time next week to discuss whatever episode 5 of Lower Decks is. As you know, they don't release the titles
Nobody knows.
early enough for our taste, but we won't begrudge them that. So you can look ahead, look forward to that. But while you're waiting, you can listen to old episodes of our podcast if you're a new listener.
We have about 90 some.
Yeah, this is the 93rd, so there's 92 other ones.
There was a discrepancy about how many there were.
God,
was it 92 or 93?
Which is typical of Star Trek. It was like, well, it depends if you count the menagerie as a 2-parter or not.
We have days worth of material, of content, rather,
Oh,
I should say.
man.
Days worth of content.
Some of them are, especially the older ones, are overlong, so you get even extra content. But what you
I
can
think
do,
the movie was appropriate length when we did Star Trek.
Star Trek 6 is is a great one.
It's
That's
hard
one of our.
it's hard to do a movie.
It's
'cause
one
you
of
have
our
to
most
keep
listened
watching that
episodes.
movie over and over again.
Yeah, Star Trek 6 is one of our. That's the only movie we've discussed so far. But you can.
We'll do some more.
You can scroll down a ways and find it, or do a search on our website. On our website at www.itsgotstartrek.com. You can sort the podcast episodes by TV series or by movie or special topics. And Star Trek 6 is one of our most popular episodes, and it's a long one. Pretty long one, but it's a good one. But you can listen to our back catalog, you can go to the website, or even better, touch base with us on social media at It's Got Star Trek, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can go to YouTube. We're getting a lot of YouTube listeners. We don't offer you any clever videos of us doing the show, because there
ain't no video.
It's complicated.
It's an audio show.
Complicated setup. We gotta dress up all nice and stuff. Come on.
I always dress up.
We might do it one day, but that's not a regular thing we do. But if you like watching a static image and listening to the podcast through your television or other device, then YouTube is a good place to go. You can go and subscribe. And, of course, we are available on all the good old-fashioned podcast distribution platforms, including, what are some options, Jesse, for the podcast distribution platforms? What's one of the top podcast platforms that you can find this podcast on?
It's Got Star Trek.
No, Apple Podcasts.
You had the right
Apple Podcasts.
You had the right idea, just the wrong concept.
Blew it.
Apple Podcasts or iTunes.
I'm not the marketing.
Your heart was in the right place.
iTunes. Spotify, Google Play.
But the path to
Google Music,
good intent.
Podcasts.
The path to hell is paved with good intentions, or something.
Amazon.
Usually.
All of them. You can get yourself a copy. Go to the website, copy the RSS feed if you want. Into Podcast Addict or Overcast, whatever. You'll find it. Type in It's Got Star Trek. You're listening to it now, so you fucking found it one way or another.
You already know how to get it.
Find it the same way, but if you need to, you can just get the podcast.
Why are you putting me on the spot? You're already listening.
What are you worried about? Just subscribe.
What are you worried about?
And of course, obviously, it's always obnoxious when people
What do you mean good?
ask for ratings, but it does help. So if you happen to have time, if you found some mild level of entertainment as we distracted you from your daily tasks, as you pottered around the house or whatever it is you're doing while listening to the podcast, you can go and give us a review.
People should suggest topics for our podcast. When we're finished, we're going to talk about the new Star Trek as it comes out, but when we're finished talking about new Star Trek, we need episodes to talk about.
Yeah,
so
let us know.
people could very possibly suggest stuff.
Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook. Email is feedback@itsgotstartrek.com if you want to just shoot us a message, and that'd be fine too. But anyway, you find us, keep listening, tell your friends, tell your boss.
Why don't you talk about that episode where some shit happens?
Yeah, give us maybe a little bit more detail.
Yeah, don't say that.
Because if you say that episode where some shit happens, the one episode I always think of is that episode of TNG where Geordi turns into that blue invisible creature.
That was a weird episode. That was so
with
weird.
The weird skin costumes that he and the other people had to wear.
I was like, that's one episode where I was like, what am I watching here?
Because some shit happens in that episode, right? All right, so that's going to do it for us tonight. But we hope you both survive and have an enjoyable rest of the week. You'll hear from us about Lower Decks Episode 5 next week. And in the meantime, we'll say happy, humble, and delicious good night.
Delicious.
Hey, work later. Let's hit the phaser range. I need moving targets.
This isn't work. We're playing diplomats.
And we're at a crucial point in the negotiation. We're both about to lose!
Why is that good?
If both sides are equally unsatisfied with the negotiation, you can close the deal. Ready for final offers? I don't like it.
I guess I can live with that.
That's a compromise!